Hello, friends. This is Dave Hurwitz, executive editor at ClassicsToday.com. I want to continue the conversation we've been having about the so-called decline of classical music in America, maybe in the world at large, and talk about how nonsensical that notion really is, how divorced from reality it is. And I mean quite specifically the issue that has been ignored, or is largely ignored, in most conversations about the decline of classical music, and that's money. Dollars and cents, folks. Money and capacity. These two things, because they're related, right? There is something called the law of supply and demand. The more of something that is out there, the cheaper that commodity usually becomes. The rarer it is, the more expensive it is, the more that can be charged for it. And I'm thinking of one particular statistic that a lot of people adduce to allege a decline in classical music or interest in classical music, and that's the fact that many orchestras are encountering the issue of playing to emptier halls. To a certain extent, if you read the news and you look at this, you find out that this was related to the COVID pandemic, when everything was shut down for quite some time and people stopped going. And everybody's having a hard time getting their audiences back, from restaurants to department stores and concert halls too. Anybody that sold anything that involved having people get in their car or their vehicle or whatever and going somewhere to be in a crowd with other people suffered. And some of them suffered much more than others. So it's not a surprise that the classical music audience suffered similarly. But now that that's done, people are having a hard time getting their audiences back. And it's for the same reason. Look at the restaurant industry. How did the restaurant industry adapt to the COVID pandemic? It delivered. And now you have all of these fabulous home delivery services. I use many of them. Oh, look. Hello, Finster. I know. Oh, good morning. Oh, how sweet. How did they adapt? They delivered, like I said. And those delivery services are still out there. And the restaurants want people to drive to the restaurant, but they're also delivering. So people have a choice. So fewer people are going out because they can do it at home. There's no difference in the classical music universe. No difference at all when you think about it. It's not that the orchestras themselves delivered in the same way, although the Metropolitan Opera has their things in movie theaters and whatnot, but they did deliver. They're on YouTube. They're on streaming services. People are finding other ways to get their fix than having to go through the inconvenience and expense of buying an expensive ticket, getting into a car, driving somewhere for God knows how long, on a weeknight, usually, as often as not. People don't have to do that, and they can get the same thing. So that's one aspect of the issue. And it's cheaper. Oh, it's so much cheaper. Food delivery is actually more expensive, I think. But in some respects, it can be cheaper. But the bottom line is, from the musical point of view, it's much cheaper to just stay home and get the same thing. Streaming however you want to stream it. You make an initial investment and a little bit of equipment, and blammo, you're in business. You never have to go to another concert again. And I don't miss them. I very seldom go to live concerts anymore because I would rather just be here in the comfort and convenience of my home, in the same way that people are in the comfort and convenience of their home when they watch major sporting events. There's some people like to go and tailgate and go through all of that rigmarole, and lots of other people just like to sit home and have a beer in front of their television. So that's what's happened to classical music. It's become something which has been so commodified and so inexpensive and so ubiquitous that what the concert halls are competing against is the fact that people can have exactly the same thing. Okay, it's not live, but for most people, I know cognoscenti make a whole big deal about live versus recordings. And of course, musicians who play live are hysterical about the difference. I don't really see much of a difference. I honestly don't, in terms of the thrill that I get from a great performance. Whether it's recorded or whether it's live makes no difference to me at all. And I suspect that a lot of other people feel similarly. So that's one issue. All right? There are alternate modes which explain why it's been so difficult for the classical music industry to get back the audience that it lost pre-COVID. The world is different, and they have not yet adapted. Now, let's look at a slightly different issue, but which is similar, and that is the seating capacity of concert halls. There's too many seats. There are too many orchestras with too many halls and too many seats. You have to remember, when someone builds a concert hall, usually they do figure that they can get, well, X number of people, and that may determine the number of seats. But these are palaces of culture. Very seldom do they go small. They usually go big, and they want to go bigger. Salaries always go up. The number of concerts always goes up. Carnegie Hall, remember, when it was the home of the New York Philharmonic, was the home of the New York Philharmonic. Now it isn't. The New York Philharmonic got its own concert hall. Carnegie Hall became independent. And now you have two competing concert organizations bringing orchestras from all over the world and ensembles from all over the world and soloists from all over the world all the time for virtually 52-week years. And there just is too much stuff for the number of people who can encounter it. You know, people talk about the golden age of orchestras back in the 50s and 40s when Toscanini had NBC. And those orchestras did not have full year seasons. Those musicians were not full-time employees. People forget. You know, sure, if you're only going to have, a couple of dozen concerts a year, it's easier to fill a hall. Much easier, because there are fewer. They're scarcer. It's more of a special event. You know, the Vienna Philharmonic, when Mahler was conducting them, gave a concert. Their concert season was a dozen concerts. That was it. I mean, concerts for most of the 19th century in Europe occurred in the winter during the season when rich people were in town, because during the summer everybody got cholera and died, and the rich people decamped to their country estates where they could avoid the plague. And so you didn't have concert seasons in the summer. Now we have the orchestras that were there during the winter go to their summer festival spot and do things every week, multiple times per day. How many people can you drag out to these events when listening habits are changing? When young people particularly are used to getting everything on their computers and their smartphones and don't feel that they should have to schlep out somewhere, however lovely or bucolic the venue might be, in order to go experience a live event where they can hear exactly the same thing at home on their headphones, on their iPods, while they're walking to work. It's a totally different model of consumption of classical music. And I see no evidence that that model is failing, that give it to them any way that they can get it, give it to people the way they want it, give it to people at every place, and they'll take it. They'll take it. Of course they'll take it. It is ridiculous to compare declining audience attendance without considering the money factor. If you really want to talk about audience attendance, then concerts should be free everywhere. Then you'll see how many people want to go. But if they have to pay, and if they have to pay a certain amount, and that amount differs from place to place, and the number of seats in the auditorium differs from place to place, and the size of the potential audience differs from place to place, and the people who built the places may not have taken into account the actual size of the potential audience from place to place because they suckered some rich person into giving them billions of dollars to build this, Kazunga, enormous palace of culture. I mean, I remember when I was in college, when I was in grad school, I went to visit a friend of mine in Chicago, and we went to see Così fan tutte in Joliet, Illinois. He was at the University of Chicago. We were in Chicago. And we drove to Joliet, and Joliet has a magnificent theater. It was an old movie house back in the days when the movie houses were palaces of culture. I mean, it sat everybody in Joliet. It was gold encrusted and ornate and Baroque. It was the most beautiful theater you've ever seen before in your life. What replaced those theaters? What replaced those theaters when movies became cheaper and more accessible and commonplace, and the output of the studios grew exponentially, we got multiplexes. I remember how exciting it was when we got our first multiplex. It was Cinema 1, 2, 3. Then it was Cinema 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and you could go see 5 different movies. But those theaters were small. They were no longer, and they were boxes. They were just plain boxes with speakers attached to them. I mean, they had no architectural distinction whatsoever. They weren't beautiful. They weren't palaces of culture. They were efficient means of consumption of the product to much, much smaller groups of audiences. But there were more theaters. They adapted. The industry adapted. It adapted. It created a new audience. People are used to multiplexes now. And they seat a few hundred people, not a few thousand people, like that gorgeous theater in Joliet seated. And by the way, Così fan tutte was rather well attended in that barn of a theater. I was very impressed by how many people showed up for it, actually. I'm out in the middle of nowhere, but it was a special event. And wow, what a gorgeous theater that was. I'd go back there just because it was so beautiful. But, the industry adapted to a new model of showing people how they could consume the product that they produced. The classical music industry doesn't do anything like that. It just builds a barn and expects everybody to fill it up at whatever price they want to charge, and then complains when they don't. And that is, frankly, risible. Absolutely risible. The Metropolitan Opera House seats 3,800 people. It's the largest opera house in the world. How many days do you think you could fill that up? Anywhere, even in New York City. You go to the Vienna State Opera, go to La Scala. Those halls, if you're used to the Met and you go to a European opera house, you're not going to believe how small they are. I mean, when I went to see at the Royal Danish Opera, I saw Paul Rudder's The Handmaid's Tale. Sure, it packed the theater. It's only 20 rows. It's less, 12 rows, with a balcony. I mean, it was like a box of Oreos. It was taller than it was wide. It was amazing. It's 1,000 people, maybe. I mean, the Musikverein, the great Vienna Musikverein, the great concert halls of Europe, 1,700 seats. I think it's 1,744 if you want to be exact. But it's like 1,700 seats. Carnegie Hall is 2,300 seats. Nobody gives any thought today to what is rational in terms of expected attendance and what people are willing to pay for that, to be able to go sit there with 2,000 other people. This has nothing to do with the decline of classical music. It has a lot to do with the failure of the current business model of classical music. Because it doesn't mean, you think about it, just think about it logically for a minute. Before COVID, or who knows, 20 years ago, you were filling up your hall regularly for however many concerts you offered. Now you offer even more concerts, lots more concerts sometimes, often by artists people don't know about. And the orchestra is getting paid a lot more money, so it's all costing you a lot more, and fewer people are turning up. Does that mean that the people who were coming a few years ago or a decade ago no longer care about classical music, or no longer want to see classical music? Or does it just mean that your business model is a failure? Those people are getting their musical fix. We all get our musical fix. Nothing prevents us from getting what we want. The only issue is, how do we get it? In what manner do we get it? What are we willing to pay for it? Those are the discussions that people should be having. Those are the discussions that people in the industry should be having. They shouldn't be just wringing their hands and wailing and moaning and gnashing their teeth and rending their garments because there is no audience. Of course there's an audience. You are failing to reach that audience, or that audience is no longer interested in what you have to offer at the price you're willing to offer it. And that's going to be the big issue. And I find it obnoxious that these people are. I remember the Minnesota orchestra strike. That was like totally obscene. You had the orchestra saying, well, you want a world-class orchestra, you just have to pay us more. Well, more money doesn't mean more class. It doesn't mean you get better players. It doesn't mean that at all. I mean, a graduate from Juilliard is just about as good a player as somebody with a lot of experience in a major orchestra these days who makes 100 times more than one of those people can claim. They're fabulously talented. You can put together a great orchestra out of local talent any day. I've been there. I know the capabilities these people have, and I know what they can do. And you get a decent conductor, and you get a bunch of kids who really know how to play, and blammo, it's amazing. We hear youth orchestras all the time give concerts that are just about as good as anything a professional orchestra does. So those are the facts. And then you've got these people saying, well, if you don't pay us what we want, then culture in Minnesota is doomed. Bullshit. It's absolute bullshit. It was bullshit then, it's bullshit now. That was before COVID. Now, it's ridiculous to think that. But what really is happening is that people want money. It's about how they deal with money. That's the root of the issue of the Boston Symphony, too. They'd like you to think it's just, oh, the orchestra's all upset because Andres Nelson's got fired. It's not. It's about how management is handling the Boston Symphony's endowment, which is at about $400 million. It's the largest endowment of any orchestra in the U.S. or possibly the world. They've got piles of money that they're sitting on, and they're going to be fighting over how to spend it or how not to spend it, how to save it, how to preserve it. That's the argument. That's the real argument. And these people are terribly, terribly entitled. They feel that the universe owes them a living at whatever salary they demand, and it just might be that there is no living at that salary anymore, which means they would have to settle for less. And the screaming that we're going to hear if that happens or when it happens is going to be something to behold. And I feel for them. I do. I don't deny them their money. But there's a reality check that has to happen. It just might not be economically feasible to carry on at that level. You may not need to have concerts every single week all year round. You may need fewer. You may need a conductor who sticks around for more than 12 weeks. Isn't it fascinating? Conductors are still operating on the old system, 12-week season, 16-week season, but the orchestra doesn't. The orchestra's there all the time, and the orchestra has to be doing something all the time, and people have to be coming all the time. Well, people don't want to go all the time. It's too difficult. It's too inconvenient. It's too expensive. Those are the questions that need to be answered. It has nothing with the appetite for classical music. There is a price at which there is an appetite for everything, including classical music. There could be a much greater appetite for classical music if people knew how to exploit the actual market and bothered to ask people, how they prefer to consume their classical music. So anyway, I'm just throwing these ideas out there because I just want when you see these articles about, the death of this, the decline of that, and everything, we see them constantly. All of this geschrei about how culture is dying and all that stuff. It is totally, completely untrue. And if it is true, they don't have the evidence for it because they don't know how to do the analysis. They don't know how to compare apples to apples. They're just spewing out anecdotal nonsense about how, we built a new 2,500 seat concert hall, and usually only 1,250 people show up at a concert. Well, maybe you should have built a 1,250 seat concert hall. Then you'd have nothing to complain about. And when you talk about, the American concert halls are this, the European concert halls are full. Well, sure, the European concert halls are half the size. It's a lot easier to fill them up, and the seasons are shorter. I mean, you have to be reasonable, and you have to be accurate, and you have to be scientifically precise, analytically precise. And then maybe you could say something. But right now, all they're doing is blowing hot air. And, I can blow hot air as well as they can, but hopefully in a more rational kind of way. That was my intent here. So keep on listening, friends. Thanks for joining me. Take care.